Good morning, everyone. We are going to start our webinar in a couple of minutes, waiting for a couple of attendees. Just going to share my screen. All right. So I think we are ready to start. Thank you for attending our webinar. Today we thought we would share the experience we had with Creighton regarding change management. It's often a pretty challenging process to implement, and we had great success implementing change management with service apps. So we wanted to share with you and share Creighton's experience. So objectives of our webinars: we try to do webinars every 6 to 8 weeks. It's to share experience. We like to contribute to the EasyVista community. So we are the organizer. We'll talk about FMX in a little bit. Presenters are going to be mainly James Williamson from FMX Solutions. Topic is Streamline your change management process with service apps. We'll try to keep it short, but just show it to you, and then if you want to ask questions to Tabitha or to James, feel free to do so. Just to give you an overview, Creighton University has been a client for EasyVista for 4 or 5 years, located in Omaha, Nebraska, 9,000 students. They implemented quite a lot of processes: incident, service request, problem message, change. We are going to do CMDB soon, and software asset management. FMX Solutions, I think most of you know us. We've been an EasyVista partner since 2009. We've done 100+ implementation. We have 7 certified consultants in the US and Canada. We provide implementation services, training. We do a lot of remote administration for clients who need help with for their administrators. And then I'm going to go directly to the topic, and I'm going to let James talk. So James.
Yes, thank you. And for those who don't know me on the webinar, my name is James Williamson. I've been a consultant with FMX Solutions for the past 3 years now. Came from the client side prior, so I've been working with the EasyVista tool for going on 10 years. And some of you know me from the call, and some of you might not know me, so this might be an introduction. So anyways, I just wanted to give a brief about me. So the challenges that Creighton faced when I approached them about change management were what we see here are the following. Just too complex for the submission process. The change review meetings were a little clunky. They had to, have printouts, things like that. Too many clicks just to get to where they needed to. And then another thing was that the using Service Manager actually was slow for them. And when clicking through the screens, the data wasn't loading as quickly. They weren't getting it on their fingertips. So in a result, there was a lack of adoption. So we had to try to see what we could do to change those. If you could switch to the next slide, please. So submitting before. So this is what it looked like for them. A lot of clicks is basically what I'm trying to bring home here in this slide. So they would go into the transition menu, go into change request, new request, click the add button like a shopping cart style like service request had before. You're probably familiar with this. And then from there, they would provide the upfront information and still have to come back and provide all the information that was required of them in the draft stage. So their submission process didn't even get submitted to approval until after the technician went back into their actions and filled out the draft. So a lot of clicks to get there. The next part, and if you go to the next slide, is about the cab. So that's about what they were doing to submit tickets prior. Now let's talk about how they were doing the cab meetings. So the cab meetings before, similar to the new request process, but in the sense of looking at it differently. You're not submitting a change, you're now reviewing changes out there. And so they had to go through the menus to find it. They had to go change request, click on cab approval, or whatever the person running the cab would need. So they'd have to find the approvals, then do the magnifying glass, look at it, and then decide whether they're going to approve it. They could do it right there in the meeting, but a lot of times they would just note it, come back to it, and then approve it later. So a lot of times the approval process was a little clunky and took a lot of time. And so things like that. Next, we go now to present it. So we're going to go into this live demo, and I'm going to take over the presentation and show you, but this is a brief introduction to what it looks like. So if you could switch me to presenter, thank you. Okay. So coming to today. So they had a challenges, as you saw in the previous slides. So what I wanted to address is the ability to put a lot of things at their fingertips. And the other part of it is I wanted to make sure it was interactive and easy and intuitive for those who may be new to the process. And so in here, they have their 4 process types for changes that they can see right off the bat. Off the fingertips, they made it so that it was easy for them to see, easy to read and comprehend. So it was matching the terminology that they were used to, not so much what Easy Vista Service Manager might keep you used to. And it also makes it intuitive. So coming across the top here, there's options to submit changes. So I wanted to make sure they could still submit changes, and I'll go into that process in a little bit. Also see what is scheduled, so the forward schedule. Not in a calendar form, but at least something that it gets what is scheduled and approved by the cab and puts it out on a view for everyone to see, and I'll show that in a little bit. They also have some KPIs that they have here on the right. Some pretty easy, straightforward KPIs, approvals, currently open changes, what's scheduled this month, what was scheduled last month. And as you can see, as I put my mouse over them, they gray out to tell you that they're clickable. So that means anything that I have on the screen is actually clickable for them to get the same information. So I wanted to make it so easy on the, for them to find what they're looking for. And if they wanted to look at a certain KPI, they could. So coming back to the submission process though, when they were initially submitting, they provided very minimal information. So they wanted to kind of help streamline that a little bit. So I'm going to click on New Normal just so you can see the form. I'm not going to submit this because this is their live form. I'm just going to show you what it looks like just so you can get an idea. So from here, they can add any information, and these forms could be customized to meet your needs as the client. This is just what met Creighton's needs. So in here, they ask for who's the submitter, who is it for, who's the implementer group, so who's going to actually implement the change. Give a short description so it's easy to read from the change window, which I'll show you here in a little bit. Detailed description, communication plans, backout plans, rollout plans, test plans, all the things that might be important to a change, at least to Creighton in this example. And so they have other questions that they had more specific. They can also put when the change is needed, so they can request it up front. They can provide a CI, so the relationship back to the CMDB, and they have an initial start that they haven't implemented, like Xavier said, but they'll eventually, it'll be populated. But this is the big part of the change in their process from a submission standpoint. Not only do they have all the questions to their fingertips and able to provide all the information that they were required in the drafts part of the process, but they also have a way to, if they have all the information in place and they feel like it's ready for approval, they can actually say, no, I do not want to submit this as a draft. And it will tell them, hey, this is being submitted to approval. If to change your response, we'll put it back into a draft initially. So still keeping that process they had before, just in case someone doesn't have all the information. So this was a big bonus in the submission process. This allows them to provide as much as they can, put it into draft at first if they want to, or submit it on to approval. A couple of good things. As a reminder, if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to use the questions section. I'll be looking for them. They're on my other screen. So if you have any questions as I go along, I'll look for them and answer them right here on the webinar. So past that, that's their submission process. So that helps streamline that by tenfold. Plus, they don't have to go to multiple screens to find that information or to fill it out. It's not as much clicks anymore. So that was one big change. The other big change was how they ran their CAB meetings. So in the CAB meetings, they could come in here and pick the different CABs they may want to go a part of, because sometimes they don't want to just have all of them. I mean, yes, we could bucket them together, and we do over here, but a lot of times their CAB meetings were more specific. So they wanted to see all their emergency or all their normal, all in one spot. So they wanted it right in their own little buckets. So just going right off the bat, if I click on normal CAB, I can go right in here and see the way it's presented. So they could come in here and see different changes in their life cycle. So the biggest change was how they view their changes and where they are in the life cycle. And making it very easy to find. So here's all the changes that are pending draft. Here's all the changes that are pending approval. Here's all the changes pending rescheduling, if there is. If not, well, then they don't have any. If we come down here, some other parts of their life cycle might be when they're implementing it. And then the other part might be CAB post-implementation review, which is what PIR stands for. And then seeing the last 30 days closed. And this is what they wanted to see. Very easy to find, very easy to understand where it is in its life cycle. Instead of having to just look at a long list, maybe click on something and then it shows it. In this case, it just is easy to find. So I'm going to show you real quick the details section of the approval. But what you see initially is some information that was provided up front, short description like I was talking about before. This is what's important to help identify what this change is for. But if you want to see more details, well, you have the ability to view more details. And now we see all the information that they had in that form. So they didn't lose the visibility to that. They actually gained the visibility. Now, of course, always the question I get is how do they change the information after it's submitted, or if they can change it after the fact? Well, we did still give the ability, and you still have to go back to Service Manager, but we made it so it goes right into that record and it goes right into the ability to change it. So that way it's not as many clicks to find it. You don't have to go through the menus. It's right there on the fingertips. So we give them an ability to click here so they can change the back-end information. Because we wanted to make this more read-only, because we want to discourage, that changing of the information too much. But you still have the option right there. From there, you can read the information laid out in the way they wanted it, and the basic columns. But let's go down to the bottom. So one other big gain from this was the approval process, the ability for the CAB to make decisions right there in the meeting. And they would use this. And as long as they were assigned to the CAB or the assigned person, because this will switch and tell you who the assigned person is, then they could process this. But nobody who is not assigned to the CAB can process this. So that's something important to know. It's there so you can see it. So I can't even process this because I'm not part of that group. I noticed that it's there, and we could change it so it doesn't show if the logged in person's not a part of it, but this is the way they wanted it set up. So because they have approval processes like their urgent process may have potential of multiple approvals in it, and as you know with change processes, that's a possibility. They have the ability to see not only just one action, but all the other ones that might be standing out there. The other reason why they wanted to show this to the people who are not assigned to it is because in the meetings, you want to easily see, okay, this is assigned to the CAB, or this is assigned to manager A, et cetera, and we need to follow up with them to get the approval done. So it's also a way to find out the information quickly of what's pending. So it's a very nice screen and a very nice place to do it. They can do it here, or if we go back to the home screen, they can do it right here. And this one incorporates both approval processes because they have one for normal and one for urgent. The rest of the process or the other types of changes don't have approval processes based on the nature of their type. So a lot of things that you could see in here. I'll go into forward schedule just so you can see that. You know, where they have their here's the ones that are scheduled, and they can go and see the details of the ones scheduled and see the information about it. Okay. They can also, in like the currently open, they can change their views when there's a lot of them. So if they want to see it in a list view versus a tile view. So there was a lot of things that we incorporated in here for adding flexibility for the user. Okay. So for the most part, that is it. You know, that's what we wanted to show. For the two big points, the two big challenges were their submission processes and their CAB process, you know, when they did the review. And so far, it's becoming very well adopted, and it's starting to fix that issue of people just getting discouraged to use it. And so because of this, we're able to give them a lot quicker. As you could see, as I was clicking through it, wasn't as slow. It was a lot better. So service apps can enhance your processes tenfold a lot of times. And then in this case, it's change management. But we've done it with other types of processes like asset, incident, service requests, etc.
James, we have two questions, one from Yana and one from Mark.
Yes. Do you mind reading them out? It doesn't look like they're displaying.
So for Yana, it's do you have all the questions target fields in the database?
Yeah. So bringing up the form, just to Yana's point, these are mapped to target fields in the database, so they go automatically into that. You don't necessarily have to do that, but that's the typical implementation, and so it makes it more flexible, easier to report on. So yes, to your question, yes, we map them.
So then Mark from Red Cross has a question: in this model, is the CAB approval a single action assigned to the CAB group? So one approves for all. By extension, if 4 groups had to approve, all 4 action would be visible?
Yes, that is correct. So going back, and I don't have an example because they didn't have one for the urgent in here. But if in the urgent approvals, they would show, you know, 4 or 5, just depending on the level of severity of that type of change in the process. So to your point, yes, it could show multiple. Okay, any other questions?
Okay, still from Mark. If you had multiple IT solutions team, each with their own CABs, could you segregate so that each only sees their worldview, but not the other groups?
Oh, yes, certainly. The filters that we use for the service apps that come from Service Manager, we can certainly have any type of identifier against either the group or the location of the person, the department, a VIP or not, you know, all these different elements. But yes, you could filter it so that it only shows for certain groups, back to your question. And only theirs, yeah. So
then a question from Michael from Gonzaga. How does this work if you already have service apps?
So the best way to answer that is what we would do is we would just, if you don't have a CAB board in your service apps, we would build one out, or we can use a templated copy if needed. But essentially, we would just implement it into your service apps, and it would be a separate app at that point.
So it would be a separate app with a different URL?
Yeah, different URL, and we could put a clean shortcut to it, so it's not a nasty one. You know, we can make it easy, but that's typically how most clients run their service apps, is depending on it. Like in this situation, Creighton has 2 versions of service apps. They have a self-service portal for their end user customers, and then they have a separate one for their cab. The cab gets that URL, and actually they posted it on their service manager in the news article.
Right, and so this is a desktop version, right? And you could have a mobile version of it?
Correct. Yep. And we do that a lot too.
All right. Any more questions? Looks like we're okay. So what we are going to do is we recorded the session. We are going to put it on our YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and review the video at any time. Do we have one more question? Looks like we have more questions. I just don't see the question. Oh, yes. Well, so Yana is asking if you would mind submitting a new change request again. I missed if you have any categories to choose from.
So yeah, just depending on, and actually I'll use the standard change as a good example because they do have one for standard. They call them types, not categories, but they have a list of different types that they have for standard. So standard change is usually the better example for it because most of the time that's when you have the different categories because they're, as you know, standard change, pre-approved changes that they're allowed to do, patching it being the best example. So yeah, we can pull a list. This is dynamically pulling. So when Tabitha adds a new category to the standard list, it will populate in here. When they use this, it categorizes the ticket as such. So we can do that in the form, and all these forms are very flexible. I mean, it's a questionnaire form. So for those who are admins in this, it's just a questionnaire form in the service manager side. We can have any fields, SQL lookup, etc., that we want in here to best facilitate the requirements. Okay, other questions? Xavier, I don't know if you...
Yes, we do have another question from Mark. Average development time for such app?
So for this particular one, depending on how extensive your process is, may drag it out a little bit more, but we typically can implement this within a day time frame. It just depends on the requirements around your process. Because if there's a lot of life cycle around it, or you have a lot of approvals, or things like that, you got to think about the change process itself, because some of them could be simple. So if I go into, say, let's do standard. That was standard. There was only that one's actually a bad example.
I think you have to add to this the design.
Yeah. So
the delivery and so on. So it's probably a couple of days.
Yeah. It just depends on the implementation because I've had some clients where they don't have a extensive change process. It's very simple, and I was able to do it within a day. But like with Creighton's, it was a couple days. Okay, other questions? Okay. Guess we have no more questions, Xavier?
So Mark was asking in days. So I would say it's still a couple of days. It's not a day because you have to go through the design. Then you do a first version of it, which might take a day and a half.
Yeah.
Then you have to do adjustment, testing. So I would say to get to this app, it's more than a day.
Yeah.
So
the day, yeah, the day is for if it's a simple change management process. So.
All right. Any more questions? All right. So I think we can close.
Well, Yeah, and don't hesitate to follow up with Xavier or myself if you have my contact information for any additional follow-up questions. We're more than happy to answer. I know that we had a short time period, but follow up with us, and we'll certainly help you if you need.
All right. Thank you all.
All right, thanks everyone.